Shenzhen, located in southern China and bordering Hong Kong, was once a symbol of rapid urban growth, a mythical city of miracles. It became the starting point for former CCP leader Deng Xiaoping's open-door policy of reform and opening up, which transformed Shenzhen into a showcase of China's economic prosperity. However, recent data suggests that Shenzhen's economic collapse has reached alarming levels. According to data released by the Shenzhen State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission on June 17th, from January to May 2024, state-owned enterprises under the city's jurisdiction reported a total revenue of 384 billion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 34.8 billion yuan, up 10%. However, total profits dropped to 4.9 billion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 21.9 billion yuan, down 81.7%. Net profits after taxes were only 1.38 billion yuan, representing a 93% decline compared to the same period last year. During the same period, district-level state-owned enterprises posted a revenue of 12.6 billion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 450 million yuan, down 3.4%. Total profits were only 70 million yuan, marking a staggering drop of 93.7% year-on-year. Net profits after taxes amounted to a loss of 190 million yuan, a 120% decrease compared to the previous year. According to a report by 21st Century Business Network in January last year, by the end of 2022, the total assets of Shenzhen's state-owned enterprises had reached 5 trillion yuan, and the city achieved an annual revenue of 1.1 trillion yuan, an increase of 25.7% year-on-year. The report stated that in 2022, Shenzhen's state-owned enterprise reform completed its 3-year action plan, and over 30 reform experiences and typical cases were promoted nationwide and across the province throughout the year. Shenzhen's State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission oversees 40 listed companies, with more than 10 enterprises boasting assets exceeding 100 billion yuan. From Shenzhen Metro to Shenzhen Airport, from OCT Group to Shenzhen Airlines, all showcase the prosperity and vitality of the city. Who would have thought that just 1 year later, this star city, with 5 trillion yuan in state-owned assets, would only see a profit of 4.9 billion yuan from city-owned enterprises in the first 5 months of this year, while district-owned enterprises earned a mere 70 million yuan. The speed of this decline is devastating. What unfolded in 2024 undoubtedly highlights the economic difficulties China is facing and the root causes of these difficulties. Shenzhen, as China's leading city in reform and opening up, once gave rise to many world-class enterprises such as Ping An Group, Amer International Group, Huawei, Tencent, China Merchants Bank, Vanke, BYD, and SF Express, all of which are global enterprises. However, over the past decade, under Xi Jinping's direct deployment and command, Shenzhen has gradually transformed from Deng Xiaoping's experimental reform site into Xi Jinping's pioneering demonstration zone for socialism with Chinese characteristics. Amer International Group, once ranked among the world's top 500 companies, suddenly went bankrupt last year. In January this year, all operations at its key project, the Amer Taichung Pingyang Electronics Information Industrial Park, came to a halt. Reports indicate that many factories across various locations could not even afford electricity bills. Huawei, originally a private enterprise, has consistently denied becoming state-owned. However, the West believes Huawei's relationship with the government is extraordinary, and that Huawei is following CCP directives to engage in activities that threaten international security. Vanke, which started as a private enterprise, was acquired by Shenzhen Metro Group in 2017, becoming a state-owned enterprise. Public opinion often says that Xi Jinping is regressing because his economic strategy involves reasserting government control over businesses and targeting private sector oligarchs. As a result, independently operated private enterprises either collapse or are acquired. In the end, state-owned enterprises expand, such that in Shenzhen they ballooned to 5 trillion yuan in assets but collapsed within a year. Since the Beijing authorities ended the zero-COVID policy at the end of 2023, the government has been anticipating an economic recovery and a surge in consumer spending. However, China's economy, which was severely damaged during the 3-year zero-COVID period, is now experiencing rare complications. The three main drivers of China's rapid economic growth, real estate, exports, and investment, have all stalled, plunging the economy into a prolonged downturn. Despite this, the Beijing government still set its economic target for 2024 at a 5% GDP growth rate. According to the latest economics data from the National Bureau of Statistics, the country's GDP growth rate for the first quarter was 5.3%, while the second quarter saw a 4.7% increase. The sudden economic slowdown in the second quarter caused China to lose further momentum in July. Currently, new home prices are falling at their fastest pace in 9 years, industrial output is slowing, export and investment growth is declining, and unemployment is rising. All of this is making it increasingly difficult for the CCP to achieve its goal of maintaining a 5% growth rate for the year. One of the biggest challenges the Chinese government is facing is reduced revenue. Since the end of last year, the Ministry of Finance of China has repeatedly mentioned at various meetings the need to tighten the belt, clearly conveying the alarming message that the country is running out of money. In mid-July of this year, the long-delayed third plenary session of the CCP was finally held in Beijing under the leadership of Xi Jinping. The authorities attempted to find effective ways to break free from the sluggish market. There were external hopes that the CCP government would reform itself, adjust its economic policies, and restore public confidence in economic development. However, some observers noted that the official communiqué, aside from emphasizing the centralized and unified leadership of the party in comprehensively deepening reform, ensuring Xi Jinping's control, and studying Xi Jinping's economic theories, provided almost no valuable measures to address China's economic issues. Instead, it further called on all sectors of society to tighten their belts. What was expected to reverse the economic decline, the third plenary session, ended up offering only empty slogans with no substantive content. Commentators believe that under Xi Jinping's leadership, China's economy has completely fallen into a ditch, and there's currently no sign of a way out of this predicament. Honorary Chief Editor of Beijing Spring, Hu Ping, who has been following Xi Jinping's moves closely, remarked that in the past, people paid more attention to the third plenary session because it was the first time a new leader would express their political stance. He said, "Xi Jinping has been in power for 12 years, so how could there be anything new? What reason is there to still have high expectations for his third plenary session?" It is widely believed that Xi Jinping's economic development theories have caused China's economic lifelines to hemorrhage, and the third plenary session of the CCP did not stop the bleeding. Xi is instead leading China's economy further towards the abyss of stagflation. Since Xi Jinping took power in 2012, he has not appreciated the booming economic environment, but has instead brutally interfered with it through political power. From the start of the global pandemic, Xi led nearly 3 years of strict zero-COVID restrictions and cracked down on tech giants. As a result, not only was China's economic momentum destroyed, but foreign investors were also scared away. In recent years, China's economic growth has slowed, the real estate sector has collapsed, and local governments are heavily in debt, leaving businesses and consumers suffering. Inflation and tightening belts have become the main themes of current Chinese society. Governments across China have successively introduced regulations in response to the central government's call to tighten belts. Some have limited air conditioning settings to save energy. Some have mandated that official receptions be held in government canteens, and some have prohibited the use of special cars for high-speed rail travel. Ms. Liu, a mid-level government official in southwestern China, told BBC China that her department had performance targets, and in previous years she could usually receive a year-end bonus of between 50,000 and 100,000 yuan after meeting these targets. She said, "I take home less than 4,000 yuan a month in salary and rely on the year-end bonus to get by. During the Chinese New Year, when I heard the bonus was gone, I immediately broke into tears." Ms. Liu mentioned that last year's wave of pay cuts for civil servants was likely the first phase of the government's belt-tightening measures, followed by similar cuts in public institutions and state-owned enterprises. Reports of civil servant salary reductions have emerged from across China, with some civil servants complaining on social media about salary cuts of 20 to 30% in regions such as Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Jiangsu. There's also an online saying that the more developed the economy, the steeper the cuts. Analysts note that this phenomenon mirrors what happened in Shenzhen, where Xi Jinping's economic policies were implemented across economically developed regions, forcing strict government control over private enterprises. As a result, these regions were tightly controlled but ended up broke, unable to even pay salaries. In addition to pay cuts, government departments across the country have introduced various cost-cutting measures over the past 6 months. For instance, Suzhou has mandated that official travel along high-speed rail lines should, in principle, not include official cars or rental vehicles. Official receptions are now to be held in government canteens, where only employee meals are provided. Anhui Province has implemented paperless offices, set air conditioning to no higher than 20 degrees Celsius in winter and no lower than 26 degrees Celsius in summer, and strictly prohibited hosting receptions within the same city. Shanxi Province has ordered that office buildings should only be repaired if absolutely necessary, and if minor repairs suffice, major repairs should be avoided. Government vehicles older than 8 years should continue to be used to reduce procurement costs, and travel approval processes have been tightened. Hunan Province has decreed that the replacement of government vehicles must meet both the conditions of being over 8 years old and having driven more than 250,000 kilometers. The province also encourages official receptions in government canteens and requires idle vehicles and equipment to be handed over to local government warehouses. The belt-tightening measures have impacted more than just civil servants. This year, salary cuts in the financial sector have frequently made headlines, with pay reductions reported at Chinese state-owned institutions in Hong Kong, and in some cases, bonuses that had already been paid were reclaimed. Recently, many public hospitals have issued documents on salary system reforms, which are also being interpreted as pay cut measures. In Shandong, a populous province, there were once rumors that all provincial public institutions would be converted to enterprises, which was interpreted as 100,000 people losing their iron rice bowls. Although the local government claimed that these were misunderstandings, they did not explicitly deny the rumors of institutional restructuring. The government is also trying various methods to stimulate the economy, but the difficulties are becoming increasingly apparent. Data from various sources reflect weak domestic demand and a sluggish market recovery. China's economic situation in the first half of this year was much worse than expected. A recent survey by the Peking University Enterprise Big Data Research Center and other institutions revealed that in the second quarter, the average turnover of small and micro business owners was 117,000 yuan, a 2% year-on-year decrease, while the average net profit margin was 4.7%, down 0.8% year-on-year. The report highlighted that weak market demand remains the biggest pain point for small and micro-business owners, while operating costs and tax pressures have also increased. Nearly 60% of business owners facing high cost pressures have taken cost-cutting measures, such as reducing staff, cutting marketing and promotional costs, asking for rent reductions, and slashing employee bonuses. The survey also found that 3/4 of small and micro business owners had accounts receivable issues, with an average of 85,000 yuan in outstanding payments, accounting for 72.1% of their average quarterly revenue. Confidence in the third quarter dropped to 49.7%, below the 50-point threshold indicating economic contraction. It's not just small and micro businesses. Large Chinese consumer companies are also feeling the impact of weak market demand. Financial reports show that Alibaba's revenue for the second quarter was below expectations, with net profit down 27% year-on-year, prompting analysts to lower their third quarter forecast. Baidu's revenue for the second quarter decreased by 0.4%, marking the first decline since the third quarter of 2022, with net profit down 7.5%. Iris Pang, chief economist for Greater China at ING Bank, analyzed the severe financial shortages faced by local governments, noting that local government revenues were previously heavily reliant on land sales. However, due to the sluggish real estate sector, this revenue source has significantly dried up. In the first half of 2024, land sales revenues amounted to 1.53 trillion yuan, down 55.7% compared to the same period in 2019. Pension plans, health insurance, and education expenses across China are almost entirely provided by local and provincial governments. Most local governments are already heavily indebted and are now facing rapidly declining revenues. While the government calls for belt-tightening, it is unable to control rising prices. Meanwhile, Western multinational companies, including Volkswagen, AB InBev, and L'Oreal, have sounded the alarm over weak domestic demand in China. They have all stated that their performance in the first half of this year was severely impacted by the lack of consumer confidence in China. In early August, the financial report of London-listed advertising giant WPP Group noted that China's outlook is bleak, with sales in China dropping nearly 25% over the past 3 months. There are also signs that consumers are being cautious. WPP CEO Mark Reed said that people originally expected a significant improvement in consumption in China after the COVID-19 pandemic. L'Oreal, a company that sells luxury goods and beauty products in China, estimates that its sales growth in the country fell by approximately 2 to 3% in the first half of this year. Meanwhile, Porsche, a brand under Volkswagen, reported that sales in China for the 6 months ending in June dropped by 1/3 compared to the same period last year. Fitch analysts pointed out that growth in China's catering industry slowed to below 8% in the first half of this year, a threshold not crossed since 2010, excluding the COVID-19 period. Analysts also noted that this trend has expanded from the catering industry to other consumption categories, including clothing, cosmetics, and jewelry. L'Oreal Group CEO Nicolas Hieronimus stated, "The only part of the world where consumer confidence remains very low is China. The job market is not healthy, and many of the Chinese have put their savings into real estate, which has lost a lot of its value." On August 11th, The Guardian's senior economics editor, Larry Elliott, warned in a column that one of the true threats to global financial markets is China's economy. Elliott noted that China's growth prospects have deteriorated. China's problems are structural and have big implications for the rest of the world. For decades, it has relied on a growth model based on building up industrial capacity through massive state investment and cheap credit. The concentration on manufacturing has resulted in relatively weak levels of consumer spending, coupled with a rapidly deflating property bubble. However, China's industrial capacity now far exceeds the needs of both domestic and foreign markets. The outcome could be a vicious cycle of falling prices, bankruptcies, factory closures, and rising unemployment in China's economy. Elliott also commented that unlike when China first became the world's factory, the problem of excess capacity in China has now intensified. Additionally, Western governments are no longer willing to sit by and watch their own industries be destroyed. Recently, Beijing announced a large-scale investment plan in manufacturing, aimed at revitalizing the economy and strengthening industrial capacity. However, this policy has further strained international trade relations. According to the Wall Street Journal, Beijing's increased investment in manufacturing is intended to restore economic vitality and bolster industrial resilience while attempting to avoid international backlash. Nevertheless, this strategy has led to escalating trade tensions globally. The European Union recently decided to impose additional tariffs on electric vehicles imported from China, signaling the latest sign of growing trade conflicts. Meanwhile, countries like India, Japan, and the UK have begun launching anti-dumping investigations into Chinese products. Some policy advisors suggest that China's economy must move away from its over-reliance on manufacturing and construction and instead prioritize stimulating domestic demand to achieve more sustainable growth. In light of China's prolonged economic weakness, Premier Li Qiang, while chairing the 5th plenary meeting of the State Council, reaffirmed the government's commitment to achieving its annual economic and social development goals, emphasizing efforts to boost the economy with a focus on stimulating consumption. A Voice of America report pointed out that China's bureaucratic system, accustomed to supply-side thinking, refuses to address the primary cause of weak consumption, Not that consumers are unwilling to spend money, but rather that they face too many concerns and that life is too difficult. The solution to this problem lies not in figuring out how to stimulate consumption, but in changing the fundamental role of consumption in the macroeconomy. People's Bank of China's Monetary Policy Committee member Huang Yiping recently called for a shift in policy from focusing on investment to promoting consumption. He urged Beijing to intensify efforts to stimulate consumption and even suggested that the government should directly hand out money to citizens.